This video will overview how to set up the CVX series controller to output your tool judgment results on the parallel I/O cable. The optional OP51657 cable will be needed when you're going to output individual tool results on the parallel terminals. As you can see, we are starting with a program that's already been set up with various tools and is passing and failing correctly. So now we'll show you how to output these individual results. To set up the outputting on the parallel cable, you need to be in setup mode and go to the output menu of your program just by clicking the upper right here, output. Out terminal is where you can set up the outputs for this function. The CVX series has 16 discrete outputs that you can output your tool judgments to. They're known as out 6 through out 21. To set up one of the outputs, just simply choose the output number that you want to set up and click the output item field next to it. It will bring up the menu where you can select what output you want to send to this output. Some of the choices are total status, which is just simply the total status of the program that's set up, so the overall or of all the tools or whatever selected tools you have. And then you have the individual camera judgments. In this example, we just have one camera, so we have cam 1 judgment. But if you have more than one camera, you'll have an individual camera judgment for each camera. So if you want to output each individual camera pass-fail status, that is also available. Partial judgments are available, and those can be set up to customize your tool judgments where you can have multiple tools kind of or and logic together. The tool judgment section is for the individual tool results in your program. And then in tool judgment are the individual judgments that are used within the Auto Teach tool. So this is only available when you're using the Auto Teach tool and if you're setting up more than one region. Let's start by adding our tool judgments to this list. To add individual tool pass-fail judgments, just simply select Tool Judgment and click OK. It will bring up the list of tools that you have in your program. Again, if you have more than one camera, each camera will have its own tab, and you can select from any tools on the list. So in this example, let's say we want Tool 101 to be set up to go to output 6. Just simply select the tool number from the list and click OK. You then have the choice to have the output turn on if it's no good status. So in other words, if the tool fails, the output will turn on. Or you can choose to turn it on for OK. So it's your choice individually for each of these tool results. So let's do another example then. So for output 7, let's say we want that to be another tool judgment. And we want that to be tool 100, which is our position adjustment shading pattern. Let's say we want that to turn on when that pattern is present. Again, the tool's already been set up to pass and fail appropriately, so I'll select that tool, and then I'll select on for OK. So output 7 will turn on if tool 100 is OK. You can then continue adding tool judgments as necessary. As you can see here, we've already added the rest of the tools. And again, individually we can choose on for no good or on for OK as needed for each tool. One more example here in tool judgment. Again, if you select more than one tool in the list when you're doing the selection. So in this example, I've selected tool 101, 102, and 103. Notice that all three tools are on the list here for output 12. What this will do is automatically logically OR those together. Again, with the OR logic being OK equals 0, no good equals 1. So it'll OR these together. So if any of these fail, this output 12 will be a fail. So that's another example of the tool judgments. Another way to do logic between tools is what's called partial judgments. And those can be set up under the judgment settings here in the partial judgment tab. Just simply click Add if you want to add one of these. You can give it a customized name if you'd like. Just click that field and change the name. And then under Settings field here, this is where you add the tools that you want to logically or AND together. So when you click on that field, it'll pull up any partial judgments that you already set up. And then each camera tab. Again, if you have more than one camera, each camera will be separated by its own tab, and then you can select the tools that you want. So in this example, let's say we'll choose tool 105, 104, and 103. And we can choose OR or AND logic in this case. So if OR is selected, it's a logical OR of these tools. Again, the logic used is OK equals 0, no good equals 1. So with OR selected, if any of these tools fail, the tool will fail. Or you can choose AND logic. So what will happen is it'll have to be AND. If this tool fails, and this tool fails, and this tool fails, this will become a 1 and fail. So it depends on the setup, how you want to set that up. You can choose OR or AND logic. So once that's set up, and you can add more as needed, as I mentioned, you could choose your previous partial judgments to be also included in your partial judgments if you'd like. So you can add more as needed. Now to output this partial judgment, we'll go back to the out terminal settings here and go to output 13. And now we can choose partial judgment and select the partial judgment that we set up. Just like before, we can choose on for no good or on for OK as needed for this situation. And you can continue adding more judgments as needed. Again, you have 16 available, 16 individual outputs. So we'll go ahead and add the total status, and we'll say on for OK. Let's say we want this out 14 to be on if the total status is OK. And we'll go ahead and add camera 1 judgment and be that on for no good status. So again, you can continue on as needed. Now, as a default, the output terminal mode is set for update every judge. What that means is every time you trigger the system, these outputs will update and hold their status until the next trigger and when it's updated. And when you're using this mode, there's also another signal called STO, S-T-O. It's an output timing signal that'll give you a one-shot pulse to tell you that the outputs are updated. To set that, it's under the global settings, and if you want to access that, you can click right here conveniently. And that's the STO output rise time, STO output duration, and output cycle time. That dictates the behavior of this output timing signal called STO. As a default, it's set for 5 as the rise time, 10 for the duration, and 15 for the cycle. But we've set it a little bit longer here so you can see it for this example, but you can adjust that accordingly. So what will happen here is when the parallel outputs are updated, the output rise time later, in this case 5 milliseconds later, the STO output will turn on. It will stay on for the duration time set here, in this example 710 milliseconds, and then the output cycle time is 715 in this example. It's greater than or equal to those two added together. So this is an important setting. This is how long it takes to send each one of these status updates. If you want to use handshaking with the parallel outputs, you can just simply enable it here as well. What that will do is it'll enable the handshaking function, so you'll have to interact with the system by using that PST input to control the I/O. So let's go ahead and try this out so you can see this working on the running program. So I'll click OK. Now, the output judgments are only outputted or updated when the system is in run mode. So if you're in program mode or setup mode, they will not turn on and off. So let's go to run mode. We'll just simply click run. If you haven't saved your settings, it'll ask you if you want to save your settings. Just click yes. So we'll go ahead and run this now. So we'll run some parts through the system. Now, if you want to confirm the I/O, just need to go to the utility menu. There's a convenient I/O monitor where you can actually monitor and check the status of the output. So as we trigger through these parts, you can see the out data 0 through out data 21 are updating according to our individual setup here, depending if we set it on for OK, on for no good, etc. The checkbox indicates that it's on. So you'll notice that the output will update and it will hold its status until the next trigger. So if I trigger again, you can see that update. So they'll hold their status, and this is that update every judge mode. You'll also notice that we get a STO signal every time we trigger. Again, that's kind of like the data ready signal. It tells you every time it's updated. So that gives you a good indication every time the outputs are refreshed. So we'll go ahead and close that, and we'll go back to setup mode. When we're in setup mode, we can actually use that I/O monitor that I just showed you to test and debug our output. So if you go to utility when you're in setup mode and I/O monitor, this will show you the status of the outputs. But what you can do is you can manually take control. If you check the box for manual output, you can manually force on and off these outputs and test on the PLC side or wherever you're taking this output to. If it's a relay, it should turn on and off according to your checkbox here. So if you check the box, it should be on. If you check the box off, it should be off. So it's a nice way of debugging or troubleshooting your I/O to confirm if your wiring is correct. So going back to the output menu and out terminal here, again you could see our outputs here. If there's ever an occasion where you need more than 16 outputs, let's say you have a bigger program and you want to output maybe 32 different outputs, etc., you can actually change this count here up to 8. So you can output up to 8 different tabs of information, if you will. So in each one of these tabs there's 16 available outputs as well. So basically what it'll do is it'll refresh and use those 16 outputs again. So as an example, let's just set this to 2. Let's say we needed a couple additional outputs. And the setup's the same. You just go in here and click the item that you want, and let's go ahead and just add a couple tools here just to get something on here. Total status. I'm just going to add a couple things here just to give you an example. So again, we just have a fresh tab, and just like before, we can choose on for no good or on for okay, same as before. And basically what we'll do is we'll have 2 tabs of information. So each one is 16 bits here, 16 judgments, and then what it will do is it'll output the first 16, give you that STO pulse to tell you it's ready. As soon as the output cycle is complete, it will then output the next 16, and again give you a STO pulse. And again, the timing's set up based off this output cycle time. So basically what will happen is the first tab will be output for 715 milliseconds in this example. Then it will switch over and output the next set. So to show that, let's go ahead and click OK and go to run mode. We'll save our changes. So what I'll do is, again, I'll go to Utility, I/O Monitor, so you can monitor this. So what you're going to see here every time I trigger is we're going to actually get 2 STO pulses every time we trigger. So trigger, here's the first set, then the second set. Actually, what you're seeing here is the off time for the STO is not long enough here. So what we'll do is, let me go back to setup mode. The STO can also be set up under the global menu, Communications I/O, and external terminal. So what we'll do in this example, so you can see this better, is I'll set this all the way up to 1,000 milliseconds, the output cycle. That's the max. Now this is just for demonstration purposes. In normal situations, you probably never set that high because it's a pretty long time, a second. And what I'll do is I'll split the difference here. I'll have the STO be on for 500, and I'll have it be off for 500. So this will help us, or you can see it on the display better. So click OK, and let's try this again. So go to run mode. Again, we'll go to Utility, I/O Monitor, and this time you should see 2 distinct STO pulses. So every time I trigger, so it'll output the first 16, give you a STO, and then output the second 16 and give you a STO. You can see there's 2 STO pulses each time. So that's how you differentiate between the packets of information if need be. So when you're using that I/O monitor, just keep that in mind, where the signals, if they're happening fast enough, you might not see the checkbox go on and off on that I/O monitor. So be mindful of that, because it only updates as fast as the screen can update. So I'm going to go back to setup mode here, output mode, and then back to our out terminal. I'm going to put that tab back to 1, because this is the most common setup, just using 1 tab. And I'm going to show you the one-shot mode. So we just showed you the update every judge mode, which refreshes each time. But if you want a one-shot output for each one of those outputs, you just simply select one shot. Now when you're choosing one shot, the count can only be set to 1, so it gives you a message there, which makes sense. So you can only do 1 item anyways when you're in one shot mode. But what will happen is each one of these outputs will output a one-shot pulse. So they'll turn on if they're on for okay or on for no good for that one set time. And in this case, it's whatever you set here in this one-shot timer. So let's set it for, let's say 750. Let's say we want 170, 150 millisecond pulse whenever one of these turns on, so we can set that here, and then click OK. So if we run this, go to run mode, I'll trigger a few times. Again, I'll go to that Utility and I/O Monitor. So what we're going to see here is when these outputs update, they're going to just be on and off for one-shot pulse. They're not going to hold their status. So one-shot mode is another convenient method you can use when using these discrete outputs on the CVX controller. So I'm going to go back to setup mode here in the output menu and out terminal. So one more setting I want to show you is the do not output when tool is unexecuted. This is a setting here, and this is only used or effective when you have tools that are not executing, if you're using execute conditions or in some cases the random trigger mode. So if a tool does not execute according to an execute condition, what happens normally as a default is it's considered okay. So if you're outputting on for okay status, it will actually turn the output on even if it didn't execute. If you do not want that to happen, just simply check this box. So when that box is checkmarked, if the tool does not execute, it will not turn on at all. So the output will just remain off regardless of on for okay or on for no good. So that's a kind of a convenient setting when you're using execute conditions. In summary, the parallel outputs can be used to output individual tool judgment, camera judgments, and custom partial judgments as needed. The optional ribbon cable is needed when using these outputs, and remember that they are only actively outputting when the controller is in run mode.